Hello everyone and welcome along to the SCE Live Podcast. My name is Sam and as always it wouldn't be a SCE Live Podcast if I didn't have my trusted friend and podcast sidekick Mr. Christopher Barnes.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, mate. To you?
Yeah, well, I'm a bit nervous. We've got a bit of a legend on today.
He is, very much so. Let's get straight to it. Ladies and gentlemen, our coup for this week is a fantastic drummer, probably quite frankly one of the greats, known for exclusively working with the likes of Paul Weller and the Style Council, Glastonbury and Live Aid, to name a few gigs he's performed at. Ladies and gentlemen, it's another coup for us. It's our pleasure to welcome Steve White.
Hooray!
Hello, I'm good. How are you doing? Everything okay?
All right.
Good. Yeah, all good. Just looking forward to getting back to some kind of normality, like we all are, I guess.
Remember that there's so many walks that you can go on to some extent.
Yeah. With 10-year-old twin boys, there is only so many walks that you can do, and like so many kids, they're really missing their sport. They're missing their football, and that's and that's sort of, it's not a good thing for youngsters. I know, and we all know the reasons, but we've got to get them back into the fresh air. We really have.
Who do they support? They got.
Yeah, they're City fans. Yeah, I know. I lost because we're all kind of diehard Charlton fans down here, and then Sally, their mum, her family are all City fans. They're all season ticket holders, and they won. They won, and even though the boys have been to Charlton a lot, and it's kind of like their second team, and they play for a team that's affiliated to Charlton. So, when we're back in the Premiership, things might change.
Steve, I know your problem because I'm a Liverpool fan. Sam's a Liverpool fan. My lad, Evertonian because of his mother.
Yeah, the female is stronger.
But I think that's the way the dominant female came through in this house.
Yep.
And he's got his Everton shirt on. But he has got a drum kit, which will be good.
Excellent, good.
I was telling you the other week, yeah, he got his first drum kit for Christmas, and he's just been going for it a little bit, which is hopefully will home in his skills later on. So we might be coming for some online lessons of you later on in the future.
As I said, just playing along to records at that stage and enjoying it. That's the most important thing.
Although he has been playing, do you know what he's been playing to lately? The Red Red Robin. And I put it on the other day. And Charlton came up on the picture.
That's our song. Yeah. And the Red Red Robin. Yeah.
So where did it begin? Where did your drumming career begin?
It began very early when I was about 8 or 9, and there was an element of music in my background because of my uncle, who was a DJ, and his brother, my dad's brothers. One of them was a DJ and one of them was a drummer. The younger one sadly passed away, and he left a drum which I got the possession of, and at the same time, my uncle, was the DJ, gave me a box of records, a box of old 45s, and then my mum and dad bought me a record player for Christmas when I was about 6. I wanted a record player, so I used to play records a lot. I used to love playing along to Beatles records and the Beach Boys and the Rolling Stones, just singles. Used to play singles and just tap away. And then when I was about 8, I had this one drum, and then I joined the Boys Brigade after seeing the Boys Brigade marching down a street in Lewisham, and immediately began to learn how to play my mummy daddy roles, and I was doing the church parades, and then we moved out to Eltham, where I live now, and I went to school, and just the secondary school that I went to just really encouraged me to play, and I just sort of spent my entire secondary education probably not doing very much studying other than drumming. I joined the Musicians Union at 14 because I was told that you needed to be a union person to be able to work. And I went to the Valley where Charlton play, and that's where the Musicians Union had their meetings. And I had to do like a mummy daddy role and a paradiddle. And this guy came up to me and he said, do you want to do a gig on Saturday? I'm like, yeah, all right. So I literally had I just got possession of my first sort of decent semi-pro kit, and started gigging when I was about 14 or 15, doing the sort of the nightclubs and the conservative clubs and the Labour clubs and the liberal clubs and the Irish clubs. That was so much more. There were so many more of them at that time. You know, working class clubs. You know. Yeah. And so I'd be playing Friday, Saturday, sometimes on a Sunday afternoon, from 14 to when I was 16, 17, and encountered my encounter with Paul when I was still 17. I was a very kind of cocky, probably not too musical, but fairly experienced drummer by that point.
So did you go for an audition, or did Paul Weller spot you?
Well, again, it's like these massive sort of circles that the universe can sometimes throw up. Is that when I was auditioning like hell, I was just like any band that were looking for a drummer, I'd go along and see what I could learn from it, sort of thing. And I went for an audition on a rehearsal studio on a one-way system in Catford. And basically, I knew I'd not got the gig. I just knew I wasn't right for them. But these guys were signed to Polydor, and they went back to the record label, and Dennis Monday, who was Paul's A&R man, said, "Oh, did you get any luck with a drummer?" And they were like, "Well, no, not really. You know, we saw a few, but nothing worked out." He said, "Oh, well, I've got to find where'd you find a teenage jazz drummer in London?" And and the band said, "Well, you know, I can't even remember their name, and I owe them a massive pint." But the lead singer said, like, "Well, we saw this kid today, you know, and he wasn't right for us, but we've got his number." So then Dennis phoned up my mum's house, you know, and because I was still living at home, and said to my mum, "Can I speak to Steve?" And, you know, Steve White, you know. So I got on the phone. He went, "So you live in Eltham?" I went, "Yeah." He said, "So I used to know a DJ that used to do stuff around Eltham and Woolwich, Morris White." And I said, "That's my uncle." And
no
I was
way.
Like, yeah. He went, "No," because Dennis was a bit of a mod back in the day, and used to go to some of my uncle's gigs that he used to do around the pubs around South London. And so the attachment was there. So Dennis said, like, "Right, well, look, get yourself up to Know Me Studios. This is the address." So I got on the train and the tube and went to West Kensington. And I went into the studio, and Paul and Mick were finishing rehearsing, and they'd got a drummer who sort of just left the building, and they were doing a gig at Brockwell Park. So they had a drummer, and you know, Kenny Wheeler, the tour manager, said, "Oh, I think you've sort of wasted your time, son, you know, because I think they've got a drummer sorted." I went, "Oh, come on, just let us in, mate. I've you know, gives a go." And he's like, "Oh," he said, "You know, you're cocky, aren't you?" And I was like, "Oh, you know, I'm here now." So I went in. "Oh, nice to meet you, Paul. I'm Steve, and I just sort of heard you looking for a drummer." He went, "Well, I've got a drummer. I said, "Can I just play for you?" And he's like, "Oh, all right. I've got 5 minutes." I said, "Well, what are you into?" And he's like, "Oh, I've been listening to a lot of Blue Note records, Art Blakey, stuff like that." So I did a really terrible Art Blakey impression, and then, I've been listening to a bit of John Coltrane, Elvin Jones. So I was like, I did a really bad Elvin Jones impression, and he went, "Oh, that's pretty good. It's pretty good that. We're doing a radio show tomorrow at Maida Vale. Get the details off of Kenny." And that was it. And I got the details off of Kenny, and he said, "Oh, you know, you're cheeky, you know." And I did manage to get 10 quid out of him for me expenses as well.
Hey!
Yeah. So it was a result all round, and then I went the next day, and bearing in mind I was 17 still, and just literally stood at the back, and just Paul was still finishing songs. It was all very you know, sort of new. It was all new. So we literally played a few different songs. I played the drums, and I just sort of went into my like Saturday night gig mode, because you didn't know what the set list was going to be. You just were told, right, it's a swing, ding 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 ding, straight, and if a fight broke out, you'd have to play a snare drum roll so they could do the national anthem. It was like it really was. It was that was what it was. But because I'd been doing all these gigs, so much gigging, I just sort of sat and kind of just watched and listened, and then he finished, and that went all right. And then he said, "Oh, you know, swing by the studio." And I went by the studio in Marble Arch, where I just started to get involved, and it just was like there was never any contracts or anything like that. We would just get offered a batch of work. It's like, right, we're doing this. Do you want to do it? Yeah, all right then. And so that's how it kind of came about.
And then that developed to Style Council, did it? The Style Council.
Yeah, the style. Paul was quite clever about that because he'd already banked quite a few singles when he launched the band. So things like "Money Go Round," "Solid Bond in Your Heart," "Speak Like a Child." They were already recorded and banked so that he could have a run of singles. That was his idea. So once they started to release the singles, the first one being "Speak Like a Child," it was like quite quickly there was enough in the tank to be releasing singles every 3 months, which is really what he wanted to do. So I came in at Long Hot Summer. So Long Hot Summer we recorded in the June. I did my first gig with him on his 25th birthday at Paris Theatre in London, and then we went over to Paris to record Long Hot Summer and the Paris Match, which was the A Paris EP. Then that came out in the August. So basically it was like single, and it was funny. We were talking about some music came on in the house, like a random sort of playlist, and about 4 or 5 Style Council tunes were on this radio thing, and Sally, my wife, was saying to me, "So how old were you when you played on that?" It's like 18. "How old were you when you played on that?" 19. "How old were you when you played on that?" 18. And it was like that run of singles from Long Hot Summer, "You're the Best Thing." This is just the singles. Long Hot Summer, "You're the Best Thing," "Ever Changing Moods," "Walls Come Tumbling Down," was all before I was 19. So
right.
It was like it is, and they were proper. They sold proper copies. I mean, Long Hot Summer was kept off of #1 by Casey and the Sunshine Band, and we sold. There's my disc for it. So that's like,
wow, yeah,
250,000 singles, one single, and that's when people bought them. They actually bought them.
Well, that's it. And then obviously the 85 Live Aid.
Yeah. So again, it was funny because there was we're all watching the telly. There's a really great series that Tom Hanks did in about the 80s, and it's about television, culture, politics, and music. And we were watching it the other night, and it was so interesting because Live Aid was featured, and and Sally was saying to me, "So did you meet David Bowie?" And I was like, "Yeah, I did." "And have you ever met Madonna?" It's like, "Well, yeah, because Steve played drums for her." "Have you ever met REM?" It's like, "Yeah, we did a festival with them." "About the Bangles?" Yeah, I met them. I met Debbie the drummer, and and you're kind of going, "Bloody hell, this is crazy." And and you look back on it and think, people go, "Oh, this is history, and that was just stuff that we were doing, and it all came about, so like quite sort of haphazardly. This like, right, we're going to do a gig, and I remember the conversations that were going about that Bob Geldof was really unsure that the industry would bite on it, and that's why Paul was one of the first people that he approached, and asked to put his name to it, which he did, and then obviously things started to snowball. But I don't, and I can honestly say this because we've got to sort of remember, it's 30 or 38, 35 years ago, whatever it is, and we were all, Paul was 20, just come late 20s, wherever it was, and bands like Queen and Phil Collins and Led Zeppelin, who they were in their late 30s. And people were going, "Oh, what are you putting all those old farts on for?" And because Queen had kind of had their day by that point to a certain degree.
Yeah.
But so they everyone that agreed to do it, I think went into it with the right attitude. Some bands, it kind of gave them a reinvention, like Queen, and it gave them a second bite of the cherry. U2 probably went. That was the sort of touch paper for them to go global, because they were doing that. But none of us, including Harvey Goldsmith, who put it on, knew that it was going to be that big. No one. It just was on the day. everyone was like, Jesus Christ, this is massive, isn't it? But because there was no sort of internet, there was no social media, there wasn't people posting pictures from the backstage area, and literally, you know, I can remember myself and Mick Talbot and the Hard Rock Cafe, which I don't know if there is Hard Rock Cafes anymore. I think there is, but they put like a kitchen in as catering, and they were just serving burger and chips and beers and Coke and stuff like that, and Coke to drink, by the way. And we literally were stood there having a burger and some chips, and I'm saying to Mick, it's David Bowie there, and he's like, you know, and George Michael and you know, and the names that were knocking around were just incredible, and I think Jack Nicholson was there, and you know, it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy, and so, you know, because there was not that sort of sense of anticipation, because we just knew that we had a gig. It was a gig, and it was going to be at Wembley Stadium, and it was going to be a big gig. But because there was the social media thing is nowhere near as intense as it is now, there was a sort of a sense of, wow, that was quite special. And obviously now looking back, it's part of popular culture. It's, you know, and a lot of conversations that I had about like things like Live Aid and talking about bands like Style Council are people in their 50s now analysing it from a slightly cynical, jaded sort of position, saying, well, that was this and didn't really do anything for Africa or anything like that. And what gets me is, it's like, in these kind of circumstances, usually it's the creative arts that are the first people that put their hands up and go, right, you know, let's do something for this. Let's do something for this. You know, and in this current sort of situation, with the way that music and our arts have been absolutely smashed, you know, it may be the time that we need a little bit of help. You know, it's definitely some musicians need some help.
What was it like when obviously you were the second act on at Live Aid?
Well, technically we were the third act on, because not many people remember that the band of the Coldstream Guards actually played before Status Quo. So
right.
So we were supposed to be first on, but then, you know, because we were one of the first bands that agreed to do it, and so we got that opening spot offered, and I think Paul said yeah, and then they came in and said to Paul, you know, the Quo are going to do Rocking All Over the World. Do you mind? And we're like, well, no, it's fine. We'll go on after the Quo, you know. And we, ironically, we had a TV show to go and do in Maidstone, because that had been booked in to go and do a TV show for the new single, which was called Come to Milton Keynes. So basically, after doing our set, we got on a coach and drove down to Maidstone, which was, the streets were empty. Everyone was watching the concert, and it was a beautiful, beautiful hot day. So we got down to Maidstone from Wembley in about an hour. We did the TV show with a second set of gear, and Kenny, the tour manager, said, like, well, does anybody want to go back to Wembley? Or, you know, it's up to you. If you don't want to go, don't go. And I'm like, no, I really want to go. I want to go and see what's... So we got back there at about 5 o'clock, just as it was kind of heating up, you know, and I still had my passes, and I just watched all the rest of the concert. And then at the end of it, you can see Paul's kind of at the front, but me and Mick are at back. You can see us very, very briefly at the back of the chorus for the Feed the World bit. When we blagged on stage, and then it was like, I can't remember, because I mean, I wasn't a great drinker or anything, but we hung around for a bit, and then there was a couple of bars and clubs that had been offered their hospitality. So me and Mick sort of found ourselves in the West End in Mayfair at a club called Samantha's, I think it was, and we used to like going there because they did breakfast at 4 o'clock in the morning. So we ended up having I think we went to Legends, and then we went to Samantha's, had something to eat, and then we got the night bus home. Me and Mick Talbot got the night bus. So about 5 in the morning, you know. So that was our Live Aid day.
Sam and I were talking the other day. We were doing a little bit of recording, weren't we, Sam? And he said he watched Queen back the other night. Did you, Sam?
Well, I watched Queen back, and I watched the whole thing back. So, but
Yeah.
it was just a moment because I've read somewhere that the amount of deaths due to COVID in the UK was the stadium of Wembley, which is probably more
deaths than
now.
that
Yes.
now. I think it was 1,000 at 82,000 at Wembley. I think there were. But you know, it was a crazy time because I remember we did Live Aid, and then we were gigging. We were doing lots and lots of work, and I remember going out, and there was a Belgian festival called Turhu, and I think it's still going, but it was a 2-part festival. I think it's just a 1-part festival now. And I think somebody said that there at that gig in Belgium, I think you two were on at that gig as well, there was 160,000 people there, you know, and you're just crazy. And then we went to Australia, and I mean, at that point, we you know, our favorite shop knocked Dire Straits, Money for Nothing, Brothers in Arms, off a number one. You know, it was like, I mean, obviously they sold, you know, but we came and our favorite shop knocked it off number one. And when we went to, I know, when we went to Australia, there was literally, I would say, we sold. There's a place called the Rod Laver Arena. I think it's still called that, and it's their kind of. It's a pretty big gig, and I think we sold about 5 nights out there, and we could have done 10. You know, it was all over the world. You know, we would go, and that was the thing about the council is that. You know, as much as with the Jam had an incredible reputation in this country. The Jam were not such a big band globally. In all honesty, that's not being disrespectful. It's a wonderful band, but because Paul had decided that the efforts for the band were going to be Europe first and going out to build up the, you know, gigging in Italy, gigging in Germany, gigging in France, gigging in Belgium, which is going to be exactly the same now because we've got to have all the carnets and all the paperwork that we used to have to stop at every border, and Kenny would have to show the manifest, and you know, and then when it was all opened up and we just go through the border, it was such a novelty. Go, oh, we've just gone into France and just gone into Belgium. And obviously you know, that's not going to happen now because of Brexit. But it was just really interesting to see, you know, how much interest there was for the band. And I mean, Japan, the Japanese love the band. They you know, I think we were talking about it with the kids last night, and you know, saying, so how many times have you been to Japan then, Dad? And I was like, I think it's 27. You know, and they're like, we want to go. And it's really interesting because my younger two actually want to go to Japan more than they want to go to America, which I think is, then that's my job done.
Yeah. What's it like? Look, when you go out on a big stage, because you played the Pyramid stage, you played Wembley. What's it like going out and seeing all those? Is it undescribable?
It's undescribable. Yeah, it's indescribable. It is really, because but it's all, for me, it's about sort of preparation and confidence, because, you know, to a certain degree the music's going to be the same, and it has to be the same. You can't just sort of go out and try and play a different sort of thing. So you know that you have to play with the same dynamics, the same intensity, because you'll ruin the balance of the music, you know. And sometimes the nerves do get the better of you, and you may be playing too fast or you overplay. But so there is a degree of self-control that's required, you know, whether, you know, I always sort of thought that I don't care whether there's 20 or 20,000, you've got to give a consistent performance, you know. That was always my thing. It's like, oh, I'm not saving it up for London, or we're saving it up for this. And because we were gigging so much, I wouldn't say that there was a nonchalance. I don't think that ever came into it, but we just got really good at it, you know. And I think that sort of carried over into the solo years, with the band's tight, you know, less horn sections, probably a smaller units, but we always used to set up quite close together, and we were always like, you know, let's keep it tight, keep it punchy. So when we were doing like Glastonbury 94, all of that summer we would be doing festivals that were an equivalent size. So, you know, so that became sort of the norm. And, looking at some of the tours that we were doing, around Stanley Road time, and you're looking at, 5 nights at Manchester Apollo, and then a year later it's 3 nights at GMEX, and Crystal Palace Stadium, Doncaster Stadium, Sheffield Arena, you're sort of going, oh, this is, Finsbury Park, and Hyde Park. We did Hyde Park and played Hyde Park, and there was like 40,000 there. It was mental. It's like football crowds.
Well,
unless you no, we won't go into football.
Unless you're a Charlton supporter.
Just what you're saying about your nerves, or whether you had nerves or not. Do you have any like pre-show superstitions or the routine before a show where you've got to put your drum kit in the right way or the sticks in the right way? I don't know. I'm wondering if.
Yeah, it was quite like show day for me was always like quite a and I've sort of realized that there was quite a lot of stress and tension to it, because on a show day I would wake up and all I wanted to get to was the show. I wanted to do the show, and I found it quite hard to, oh look, let's go for a lovely walk and go and see that bird sanctuary and things like that. I used to find it quite, because I want to get to the show. It's show day. And I used to really love the days off. And, that's when I used to really enjoy my traveling, especially if we were going to Japan and you'd have a few days off to acclimatize. And that's when I saw a lot of culture. But on show day, it's like, you'd wake up and it's like, you'd turn on the telly if you're in this country and it's like Richard and Judy or something. And you go, and it's like, well, you'd go for a walk around the town or go for a, whatever you do, but you kind of think it's show day.
Yeah.
It's I want to get to work, I want to get there. So we would always, we'd always say like, we'll leave the hotel at about 5 o'clock and get down to the gig for a sound check. And a lot of the time Paul go, I'm bored, let's go earlier. So we'd get down to the gig and we'd kind of feel a bit easing into it a bit more. I mean, luckily at that time, because we were doing big shows, I used to have a little room, if there was space, to put a practice kit in. So I would, delve into my go into my practice room, have a little warm up. Then we'd do the sound check. And sometimes our sound checks were quite long because, Paul would like to work on new songs and try new things. And let's do a cover of this and let's do this. And so we were evolving the set. The set was never the same a lot of the time. It was quite a varied set, so there was a lot of songs that we were playing. So we would change things about, and we genuinely like playing. So it wasn't, you see some bands that kind of walk on, bosh, bash, bosh, bosh, clang, that's it, get into catering. We were not like that. We would always be trying stuff and jamming and just playing through songs. So that would take up a bit of time. Then it would be a meal. Some of the band didn't like to eat before a show. But I like to eat. I like to have some, something substantial, and then I would go for a walk. And whether that would be in Berlin or Tokyo or at the back end of Manchester Apollo, around that area, I would like to go for a walk. A couple of times in America, people have said, no, you really shouldn't go for a walk. So that would be the routine, and then it would be like showtime, and you're like, you sat there and it's like, what time is it? 7 o'clock. What time are we on? 9. What time is it? 7:05. What time are we on? Because you just want to get to it, and that was, and I think that's one of the reasons why, in the end, after 25 years, I didn't want to do that anymore. I used to find the daytimes really stressful, not the gigs. The daytimes, the hanging about and the traveling. That was I used to think, this is, God, I'm spending so much time. I mean, so it's like, as Charlie Watts said, 30 years in the business, 5 years playing, 25 years hanging around, and I sort of get that. I do get that, and that's where it becomes either, you can see, not in general, looking at music business, you can see how bad habits slip in because you've got so much time to fill, and it is really hard. I mean, because digging coal mines and being on the front line of during the COVID, that's hard work, but it still required a discipline, because you'd like, you'd do the gig and you would be as fired up as you could possibly be, and the natural inclination is to grab a bevy or something, so you're straight on, right, but if you've got 28 gigs in over 5 weeks, you can't do that. Because otherwise you end up just looking forward to the bevy, so you feel as good as you kind of did,
Yeah, I think if you're a musician, we're all musicians. It's hard to explain, even from our standard level, to your that nervous energy waiting to go on. You just want to get on, don't you? It's nervous energy just to go. But as musicians, it's the hardest thing to describe how the feel. So when you see all those people, because Sam and I, we're in a band together as well, and when there's a big crowd and they're up for it, it's hard to I don't really see the crowd in the end, because I'm focusing so hard on the members and looking out for our drummer. In fact, our drummer Max, he's a big fan of yours. We had to get his name in. Max Mealy. He's a good. He's watched your documentaries and stuff like that. And
good lad.
He's a good lad, Max. But yeah, there's many times I'm the bass in the band. There's many times when we've been playing, I've just got a little bit close to that cymbal. Oh, it's just an electric shock right down here.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the same. If it's the same for everybody. It's a sound check. It's it's sat around the dressing room, and obviously at that level you've got catering, you've got things that make it more comfortable. But it's the same thing, and it's the same thing when you finish the show and you're like, and it's like, oh, can't do it tonight. I've got another show tomorrow night, and then. It's discipline. It's you can't do it for that long without having a certain degree of self discipline. I never ever drank before I went on either. It never happened. So because I just couldn't forgive myself if something went wrong and I'd had a couple of pints. And I know drummers. There's some drummers they'll have a little vodka before they go on, and whatever. But it was never the thing for me.
And obviously when you took it, Paul Weller went on his own. Stanley Road, Heavy Soul. Those songs they'll be played for the next 30 years. Some of those songs, and I always remember "Out of the Sinking" was the Sky Sports football track for a while. So you must have sat every Sunday and listened to you.
Oh, well, those were those were like really, they were amazing times. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I was so lucky, and I mean that kind of was. I suppose the sort of chronologically that was probably Britpop, and I don't that was the period that it was, and we were never really part of Britpop, because by that point we were called Dad Rock, but so we were like, oh, we're not Britpop, we're Dad Rock, but obviously there was Oasis were like around at the time, and the whole kind of lad culture, and I mean football, and Ian Wright had a TV show at one point. You can still see it. Wright, he had a TV show, and I think Caprice was on there with Tony Adams, Ulrika Johnson, and we were doing Out of the Sinking, and because it was on the Sky Sports thing, everyone went mental, because I don't think they'd associated. It was instrumental. So there was a lot of crossover between football and I suppose that lad sort of culture thing, and it was great, and it was a great time, and obviously my brother was in Oasis at that point, and I mean that was just a different strata, of big, that.
Yeah, but it's interesting, because we were talking before, me and Sam, we were talking about this. Over the history of music, there's certain brothers that have been musicians. Some have been in the same bands. Some have been, and your brother Alan, he was in Oasis. Two brothers who play drums from London. Probably the two of the biggest bands in the history of British music.
Oh, it is weird.
so did he see you playing and thought, I'll fancy a bit of this? Or
I think that was the case. I mean, I because I was in Style Council and being brutally honest, was earning quite good money as a young man. My mum said to me, you should buy yourself a house when you can, and so I saved up, and I didn't buy silly cars. I saved up and I bought a house. So I got my independence, and I moved out quite early. So when I moved out, Alan was 5-6 years younger, so he was still only 14, and that was when, you know, my little drum room that my dad had built in our loft became empty, and there was a drum kit in there. So he used to sort of climb up the ladder and go and have a little bash, and then you know, he really got into it. So I said to him, well, I'll tell you what, Al, I'll pay for drum lessons, and you can go and see Bob Armstrong, who was my teacher. So he went along to see Bob, and Bob was like, you know, absolutely, you know, he got on like a house on fire with Alan, and you know, so again, he was ready, and even before Oasis, I used to get, Alan used to dep for me. He did a couple of gigs for Galliano when I couldn't do them, and he also did he played with Dr. Robert for a while. He was playing with Dr. Robert, and when he was kind of spotted with Oasis for Oasis, he was playing with an artist called Ida, who was signed to Creation Records, and he'd got the call to do a session. And basically, they were playing at a studio in Fulham, and Noel was at the studio and heard Alan playing for Ida, and said to Alan McGee, "Who's playing drums on Ida's track?" And he's like, "Well, his name's Alan Way." He said, "It's not Steve's brother, is it? Who plays with Weller?" And he said, "Oh, I don't know. I'll check." And it turned out that it was Alan. So then my mum gets the call, like she did from me, because Alan's still at home. There's someone called Noel on the phone for you, Al. You know, so he took the phone call, and then he called me up and said, "Oh, you know, I've just got the call to go to see Oasis, to go and see Oasis." And there was a lot of controversy, and I have discussed it with Tony, that Alan knew about that Tony was going to get the push before Tony got the push. It's not the case. That Tony was, you know, what happened between Tony and Noel happened, and then Noel was going to look for a new drummer, and Tony's become a friend of ours and a friend of mine, and he's a top guy, a lovely guy, and so that, you know, it was a sort of a fairly, as far as we could see, a fairly clean break. He got the audition, and he said to me, what should I do? I said, well, just go down to the record shop in the high street, buy anything you can buy them, learn it, and hope for the best. And he did. And then when he went to the audition, they were like, they just played a couple of Beatles tunes. I don't think they even played an Oasis song. And then the same, you know, exactly the same sort of thing. He learnt the songs. They had 1 or 2 rehearsals, and then I think they did Glastonbury about 2 weeks after he joined.
Wow.
So, you know, and then
the rest is history, yeah.
Well, the rest is history, because they went down to Rockfield and did What's the Story, Morning Glory, and it was done in a very short space of time. And then I saw him. We were out at a festival called Out in the Green in August, and that was Oasis, Paul, Sheryl Crow, REM, Bo Diddley. I think the Red Hot Chili Peppers might have been there. It was like, so I saw Alan, and that was in Switzerland, and that's the first time I'd seen him for about 4 months, because he'd been out gigging. And they said, "Oh, you know, come get on the bus, and we'll come and they'll play you the record, but we'll play you the record." And it was baking hot, really boiling hot. And they had a lovely bus with aircon on, so it was like get out the heat sort of thing. We had a couple of beers, and they played us What's the Story, Morning Glory, and it just said like, "What do you think? And we're like, you know, and Liam's like, when the intro to Don't Look Back in Anger, and he's like going, "Oh, sounds like Lennon, doesn't it?" It's like, yeah, it really does. It really does. But it was such a great time, and you could tell at that point it was like, wow, this record is going to be big. I don't think people knew how big it was going to be. It just, you know, it just kind of sort of caught, you know, and I really, in all honesty, didn't see Alan probably more than maybe at Christmas for about a year or two, because because I was working, had a young family, he was touring, and you know, we'd get home for Christmas, and I'd see him at my mum's for Christmas dinner, and then he'd be, where are you going next? It's, oh, South America, Australia. I mean, they hit it hard. You know, they did Argentina, they did Chile, they did Brazil, they did Mexico, they did the big American tours as well. So he was out on the road a lot. You know.
Does he have any sort of regrets to his Oasis career, or did he? Or did he smashed what he think he was physically capable of?
No, I think I can't really sort of speak on behalf of him, but I think that it's sort of fairly public knowledge that it wasn't handled particularly well at the end. It wasn't, and I think Alan's said before, if it had just been like face to face, like, look, we want to do something else, or we want to get someone else in. I mean, I've said this before and got on the wrong side of Oasis fans, so I'm going to be really careful about that, because I think, I just think it was the way it was handled at the end, and he's got nothing but great. There's a lot of, despite how it ended, there's a lot of great memories and fantastic achievement, and nobody bears anybody any ill. Life's too short.
Like you, when you hear the tracks you've played on, you can say, I was part of that.
Yeah, that's it. And every time Wonderwall comes on, or Don't Look Back in Anger, and at Christmas, and everyone, let's have a sing song, and you put that on, and it's like, he can say, that's me.
And then obviously you've played in with other bands, sort of mediocre bands like The Who,
just a small band.
Depping in for The Who. What's it like filling someone like Keith Moon's shoes? Because he was a very crazy drummer.
That was a really kind of surreal time, really, because obviously it was a friend of mine called Angie Jenkinson who worked for Teenage Cancer Trust, and they'd asked The Who to do it, and obviously Zach was out with Oasis by that point, so there was a little bit of like, this is all a bit weird. So Zach was doing Oasis, so he couldn't do it. And I don't really think that I don't think that at the time Pete was in the mood for it. I don't think he didn't think that because it was on and it was off, it was on, it was off. Yeah. And it got to like literally a week before, and Damon and I had really not heard anything about whether it was happening. We'd sort of got told to learn 4 or 5 songs, which we learned, and we were told, look, they'll probably do 3, and then in the end it was like, we're going to do 2, and it's going to be Who Are You and Won't Get Fooled Again. And they booked a massive rehearsal room at Bray, and we'd gone down the night before, and we were staying on a roundabout at a Premier Inn, and we went in the morning, and the kit was all set up by the tech, and basically I think Roger turned up, Bill Kirbishley turned up, then Pete turned up. They played the tunes once and both left, and that was it.
That was it.
And me and Damon were like, what is it happening, or what's going on? Yeah, it's happening. So I mean, literally our contact and engagement with Pete and Roger was minutes. It was just minutes, really, sort of, and we'd met Pete for a chat a week before, but it was literally, I would say, probably our entire time in their company, was, including the gig, was no more than about 40 minutes.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so,
that's amazing.
No, there was no messing about. And it's really hard. And to be honest, I didn't enjoy that experience that much, because I felt underprepared for it. It was like, and it's all right getting up and having a bash through Won't Get Fooled Again in the pub after a couple of Stellas, which I'm perfectly happy to do. But to get up and bash through Won't Get Fooled Again at Live Aid is a kind of bit of a, and like I say, we came off stage and they'd left, they'd gone, and I didn't really know, was it a success? Was it
but you've got the memories of it to look back at. You know
so it was great. But what I think that taught me was that after then, I'm not going to take anything any job on that I'm not completely prepared to do. I just, it's not, I'll get up and have a jam, Whitey. It's not my thing. It's just not my, I don't like doing that. I like to be worked. I like to be prepared. I like to have everything off the, right up there. And it's like when I went to work with John Lord, I finished with Paul and went out to work with John Lord, and John Lord from Deep Purple is like, he's one of the best people I've ever met. I loved him. He's a great guy, wonderful musician. And, people sort of, oh, you don't see much of you since you left Weller, do you? It's like, one of the biggest gigs that I ever did was after I left Paul, when we went to Brazil and played in Sao Paulo. So, that was amazing. And I really, really loved that. But the amount of work that I put into that to be able to do his, concerto for group and orchestra, which is like, it's a classical piece, and then you've got this orchestra, and then you're coming in, and then there's all sorts of stuff in odd time signatures and things like that. And I just thought, I am going to nail this. And so I studied that for days and days, so that when I went and did the gig, it was like, right, let's have it, And
so that's where you've kind of gone now, because you do Jules Holland's. You've done Jules Holland stuff playing with Charlie Watts, and I've seen the clip with the three of you playing,
with Charlie and myself, and
it's really technical. And then that brings you on to the program you did, The Art of Drumming.
I think that I sort of started to look for changes again, and obviously being a drummer, and a drummer that is, in all honesty, is associated very much with the success that I had with Style Council and with Paul. There's still people, because of YouTube, that think that I still play for Paul, because they're watching the videos and they don't realize I left 13 years ago or whenever it was. But and that's wonderful, because the stuff, my contribution is appreciated, which is really nice. But I think that I sort of saw a change coming in the music business, that with streaming and what that was going to do to the earning capacity. And it's, I don't believe that you do music just for the money. You do it because you love it first, but you've got to make a career. So I decided, some of the happiest people I know that play music don't make any money. And that's a good lesson. It's good to think about that. They just enjoy it for the love in their heart for music. But if you are somebody that's chosen music as your profession, then you've got to sort of keep an eye on what your capacity to earn. And as I was getting older and I was seeing what was going on with streaming, and I was thinking, this is not going to be good. And it wasn't, and it isn't. And so I decided to sort of move into other areas and expanded the education thing, and I got a job teaching at Trinity Laban, where I get to teach some of the best young drummers in the country in a grade 1 listed building overlooking the Thames. So it's literally beautiful to go to work in Greenwich. I've got my studio. I've got up to speed with technology. I mean, I recorded a single last week that's like a worldwide kind of dance record that's coming out from my studio in Kent, and I work with two guys called Chris Haig and Joel White, and an engineer called David Glover, in a project that's called Haig and White, and we put an album out, and once again we sort of saw the fact that just putting live music out, putting recorded music out, is just really hard, unless you've got that heritage name, that people are going to go, yeah, I love those tunes. And, once you get beyond a certain age, it's quite a hard thing to do. So that's when we decided to sort of switch to trying to sort of get music onto television shows and writing for TV shows. And our first job, we got to do the theme tune for a thing called Cold Call, which my wife was starring in for Channel 5. And then she's got a company, and they've got something else commissioned and called Madame Blanc, which is should have been filmed by now, but is filming in Malta in April, and we've done all the music for that. So it's a good way to get good music out to an audience, rather than putting your heart and soul into it and then being told by Radio 2 that it's not this and it's not that and it's not the other, so we're not playing it, which you do get quite a bit of. So basically I just thought, I can't be bothered with all of that anymore. I'm just going to do what I do and just be a bit clever about how we place it. So we've got our little We've got our studio in Sheffield. I've got my studio in Kent. Chris can send me tracks, and I can put the drums on in my little drum room here. And then we get together. I mean, it's been difficult in lockdown, but then but we've managed to keep working. We've got a single coming out imminently. I'm not sure when this is going to be broadcast, but we've got a single coming out imminently. Which is a thing called Last of the Violet Gin, which is I'm really proud of, and we've done that as a collaboration with a great photographer called Mario Pietrangeli, who done some amazing pictures in lockdown. And we've collaborated on a sort of an audio visual thing. So that's all. I love doing that. And then we're writing for the TV series. So that's kind of kept us busy. You know, it's we've not sat back and got really down about the fact that we can't play because we've just been doing other stuff. And I think unfortunately the COVID situation has what it's done is it's actually compounded a lot of things that were happening anyway with music, you know, and I think we've worked out, in all honesty, that, you know, Tory governments don't really care about the creative arts. It's not really it's like, as long as the fish are happy, but the fish are not happy because they were shafted anyway. So we've got this situation where not only the double whammy of COVID, but Brexit and the fact that they couldn't be bothered to give some exemption to musicians. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. I have 100% faith in younger musicians because they can only work to what they know. So that if the juices creatively are flowing, it will carry on. It just, in my opinion, in this country, which produces some of the best writers, some of the best musicians, some of the best creative, CGI studios, you know, we do the whole lot in these islands, and we give it so little respect and support. Yeah, and it just baffles me that, you know, where's Tom Cruise making his Mission Impossible film in Pinewood? You know, where's the James Bond films made? In this country, you know, where does The Office come from? You know, it was written by Ricky Gervais. It's like, you know, literature, and you know, whatever you think of Ed Sheeran, you know, or Adele, they're pop artists. You know, they pay their taxes in this country, unlike many of the Tory party, cohorts. So for me, it's just something that has always been really, really apparent, that in this country we do the creative arts brilliantly, but we just don't support it or respect it.
Do you think your lads will get into drums? Have they shown an interest in it?
They like music, but as for getting into drums, I think drums kind of, or music, you know, it finds you, and you don't really have a choice in it. They're doing lots and lots of things at the moment, but in all honesty, I don't think drums is as sparked their fire. I mean, they love their football. They love their football. They're doing their martial arts and they're doing their schoolwork in these strange times. But no, I don't worry about it too much. If they want to play. If they don't, it doesn't bother me.
That's the best way to be. I think music. We were talking about this the other day, weren't we, Sam? And you're influenced by family members, and I think it's in the blood. I think music's naturally in you. But if you're influenced by someone, they've got two good influences there. They've got you, and they've got an uncle who's they both played us some of the most amazing tracks.
It doesn't
always happen. Yeah, and
they've got happen, they've got a mum that's on the telly all the time as well. You know,
Speaking of your wife, Sally Lindsay, she was in Coronation Street
many years ago.
Many years. Did you on new things that she does? Do you have to help her with scripts and stuff like that? Do you do that?
No, because she's got a bloody photographic memory. She can, you know, it's incredible the way she learns scripts, but she's got a company now that she's part of called Saffron Cherry. It's a TV production company. So she's producing and she's writing, and you know, it's the same. It's like sitting around waiting for the phone to ring. As you get older, it's not an option. You don't, you know, you've got to create stuff for yourself. And so she and her partner Caroline have created. They've got a children's show on Channel 5. They've got another show in development. They've got the Madame Blanc, which they've got commissioned. So it's not all about, hey, look, let's do the show. It's the other. If two people with responsibilities, and we've got 2 elder children, we've got 2 younger children, we've got a dog, we've got a house. You've got responsibility. So you've got to kind of be realistic. And for me, I've never been bothered about waiting for the phone to ring. Oh, am I going to get the call from them? Am I going to get the call from them? Because it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that.
And on your style of playing, because obviously we watched you for years and years. Have you got like a jazz? Are you a jazz kind of player?
Well, I originally got to play. It comes from playing the side drum, because that's So if you think about like walking with a side drum, that sticking technique makes perfect sense. It's difficult like that.
Yeah.
So basically, that's where it comes from. I was taught by jazz drummers and military drummers.
Right.
But if you're being absolutely sort of honest about what the best way to play the drum kit is, it's what's called match grip. But it's a personal choice. I mean, I've been playing like that since I was 8. Sometimes I switch around and play like that just for the hell of it. But it's a personal choice.
And we've got to ask, because we know time's at the essence. But Sam, we were talking about because we're from Liverpool, and in this city, Ringo gets a lot of stick.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if he gets the stick because of his, what things that he said, or the fact that, I think the case is that once he was able to get out of Liverpool, I think he did, didn't he? And that was it. Yeah. And I don't think he kind of, he came back a few years back and said a few things, didn't he?
He's not. No more autographs.
Yeah. But I've met Ringo, and I got invited to go to his house to get a charity thing, something for charity signed, and you only speak as you find, and he was all right. He was great to me. He was nice to me. And that's why, I mean, my association with Ginger Baker over the years, people go, oh, but he's not a very nice bloke. It's like, well, look, he's not going to be your brother-in-law, just, and speaking of Ringo as a drummer, I think it's very rarely that a day goes by that I don't listen to something by the Beatles, some tune by the Beatles. And he is a drumming genius, and drummers are still trying to get the essence of what he does on the drums 55 years after he first did it. And people, you go to sessions and they go, oh, I just sort of want a bit of a Ringo thing, it's like, well get Ringo then, because his dynamics and his swing and his feel, you listen to the Beatles, as I say, I love the Beatles. We have the Beatles on a lot in our house, and you're constantly kind of going, God, that's so good. That is so good. How did they get that? And it comes down to how good those musicians were, and his touch on the drums, his balance when he plays. If it was all cack-handed and it was all sort of too snare drum heavy, and those records would never have swung the way they do. And so as a drummer, I think he's just out there as one of my all-time favorites.
Because I've seen a clip of they've got the Ringo kit set up, and Dave Grohl's having a go on it, and they're all different drummers, and they couldn't create the sound.
No,
but it's personal. Yeah, it is personal. As you were saying before about when you were going through the club scenes and the working men's clubs, that's exactly what happened to Harrison when they went out to Hamburg. He was 17, learned the game. They came back to Liverpool, and they were a completely different band.
But they learned that they'd kind of got that. They cut their teeth. They paid their dues. Whatever acquired their chops. And I mean, there's that record that came out a couple of years ago, which I think was the Live at the Hollywood Bowl album, and I think that Giles Martin remixed it, and some people are not into that, but I got that record, and you can hear. Can only be described as a muscularity in the sound. They sounded powerful. They were a powerful band, you know. And maybe some of the production on the early stuff suggests that it's all a bit poppy, but that's about the production. When you listen to them live at the Hollywood Bowl, they are kicking it. They are digging in and playing quite hard. And Ringo just sounds amazing. It's just brilliant.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah. Favorite Beatles song before we finish?
A favorite Beatles song? Oh God. Do you know what? I'm going to say that it's really hard, but I do love While My Guitar Gently Weeps. I think that's an absolutely beautiful song. And who's your favorite Beatle? I haven't got a favorite Beatle, but I do love George.
Yeah, a lot of people George up in this part of the city.
George is.
Yeah, they just worked, didn't they? And they like most bands, like you've played with the best. You just get a bond with certain musicians, don't you? And they were just four entities that came together, and it was the right time.
Well, I had a lovely experience with when we did the Come Together thing with Paul, and Sir Paul came down, and him and Linda were there at the studio, and he actually went at the end of it. He wrote a little letter.
Oh wow!
So saying, "Dear Steve, congratulations on the success of the Help album. It was good to be involved with the session. I think a great time was had by all, even though for me it was 30 years ago. Thank you for your vibes on your drums and your excellent jamming," because we had a jam session. "I am glad it worked out so well. Now let's hope it has a desired effect. Warmest regards, Paul." So there you go. Yeah, Sir Paul McCartney.
What's it like? I've got to ask you, what's it like jamming along with Paul McCartney? I'd be like, oh my! I don't think I could cope.
It was surreal, and I was using I had a Rogers kit in the studio, and he came in, and it was actually Linda that started to pick up some percussion, and she just kind of started messing about with the percussion, and then Paul sort of went, "Is it okay?" And he sat down at my drums and started playing the drums, and then he was on the piano and on the Wurlitzer, and we were just kind of jamming stuff, and then he started to say, he said, "Oh, Rogers," he said, like, I think did Al Jackson used to use Rogers kits with Stax, didn't he? And I'm like, yeah, he did. So knowledgeable, and and so I you speak as you find. You know what I mean? And he came down, he did the job, and Damon and Steve and I, we all got letters from him, saying, "Nice one." You know what I mean? Who thinks to do that? I mean, I've got one over there from. I've actually got one over there from Pete and Roger. So that was.
Oh, there you go. You got your letter. They spent more time writing the letter than the playing.
Yeah. Gents,
it's been a pleasure.
Absolute pleasure, guys. That's been another edition of the SCE Live Podcast. Before.
Well, I'm on Twitter for Whitey Drums, or Drummer Whitey on Twitter, and I've got my website, which is whiteydrums.com, and I'm always posting bits and pieces up. So say hello.
Thank you so much.
Another edition.
What a guest!
What a guest! Fantastic. Cheers. Those stories. Make sure you follow us at SCE Live across all social media platforms. We'll be back next week with another edition of the SCE Live Podcast. Make sure to stay safe out there, and as always, bye-bye.